Senator Heitkamp. I hope you have a good, healthy day today, and we welcome you here to Atlanta, Georgia for the Georgia Native Candidate Forum. And with that, I would turn the mic over to Councilman King to do the introduction, and then we have with us Principal Chief Vonnie McCormick with the Lower Muskogee Creek Tribe, and we have Erica, and she is with Four Directions, and we're bringing her in and making sure that she takes over as we go along. So with that.
Terrific.
Good morning, Senator. I'd like to introduce Senator Heidi Heitkamp, who I met back in D.C. when I was the president of the council at the time. And one of the things that I admire about her, she not only comes from a large family with her siblings, but also her background was, just a normal family that, had challenges. And so, in looking at that, one of the things I've always admired about her is when we went to her office in D.C. that talked a lot of issues regarding the struggles of our Native people. And so with that, I want to introduce you and thank you for being here, Senator. Appreciate you very much.
Well, thank you so much. And I want to start out by saying none of you would have ever met me if it wasn't for Indigenous and Native votes. You would know who I am. It was, in fact, Native people who came out in record numbers to support my candidacy. Part of that was the trust that I built over a long period of time serving the state of North Dakota and all the people of the state of North Dakota. And so securing that trust, I was able to also secure the support and the votes. And so I want to thank you for inviting me to this forum. I want to tell you how thrilled I am to actually be here. I wish I could be there in person to see all of your faces, but I put together kind of a list of 6 reasons why this vote is so important in the state of Georgia. I think the first thing that comes to mind is I would not know the Muskogee. I would not know the Eastern and the Atlantic tribes if it weren't for my opportunity to serve. Because our vision of who Indigenous is in this country really reflects where we came from. And where we have come from is, in my state, Plains Indians, whether it's the Ojibwe, whether it's Lakota, Dakota, Oglala. I mean, we could go through the list of the people I know and the people, the Crow, the people of Montana that I've worked with, the people of South Dakota that I've worked with. But I was so enriched and blessed by meeting the Lumbee, by meeting the Muskogee, by meeting all of the other tribes. And I wondered why it is that when we think about Native people and Native votes, we think of Nevada, we think of South Dakota, we think of North Dakota, but yet that Native vote and those voices of people, Indigenous people across the country is so critical to getting a better view of historic trauma, a better view of broken treaties, a better understanding of the plight and the historic wrongs that were done that need to be basically addressed by the United States Congress. And so I was thrilled to become a member of the Committee on Indian Affairs. I was thrilled to spend a lot of my time working with colleagues across the aisle, whether it was Lisa Murkowski, to basically advance some of the issues that we have in Indian country and some of the challenges that we have in helping tribal leaders, but starting always from the point of sovereignty. And so the first reason why I would tell you is it critical that the Native vote in Georgia turns out is so people understand there is a Native vote in Georgia. And by the numbers, I think you guys have been talking about this, you could determine the outcome of 2 very critical races, one in your own state for my friend Stacey Abrams, who I've known since she was in college, actually, who I know will address the wrongs that have been done, that will do the things that need to be done. And also, you could, in fact, elect the next United States Senator and determine, interestingly enough, the outcome of the United States Senate. And so what I would say is it's so critical that you get out and vote, because we need to understand across the country that Indigenous is just not Plains Indians, it's not Alaska Natives, it's not Hawaiian Natives, it is all people throughout the country who are Indigenous, who have had wrongs done, and the need to advance treaty rights. You saw what happened with the Oklahoma decision. We were able to secure finally justice in Oklahoma on jurisdiction. Justice Gorsuch, who promised me that he would bring an awareness of Native American issues, has been your champion. You guys supported, the National Congress supported his nomination. He was able to do an amazing piece of justice affirming decision in the United States Supreme Court that was quickly reversed when the decision was, or when the Supreme Court makeup changed. The second reason why I think you all ought to vote is because your grandparents couldn't. We talk a lot about voting rights, and we talk a lot about what the disenfranchisement, whether it's of women, whether it is of African Americans, whether it is barriers to the access of the polls of people of color, but we don't really fully appreciate that while our Native brothers and sisters put on a uniform and fought for us and code talked and led the way. I mean, the code talkers, everybody talks about the language, but they were the scouts. They were the people who were first on the scene, who were risking their lives to provide safety for our troops, but also to help win this victory. They couldn't vote when they were crawling through the jungles of Asia. They couldn't vote when they were defending us at the Battle of the Bulge. And so it is so important that we honor our ancestors, that we honor, in my case, the service of my uncles and my father by exercising that right to vote, that freedom that we have. And so you are the last group, you are the first Americans and the last Americans to actually secure the franchise, and we can't let anyone take it away. We've got to be vigilant. And my story in the state of North Dakota, after the 2012 election, the opposite party decided, we can't have Native votes because they might not make the decision that we would make. And so we've got to fight for that right to vote. But if we fight for the right and the right's not exercised, that is not in keeping with the struggles of our ancestors. The other reason why you should vote is because it matters. These are tight races. I watched very closely the Lumbee vote in North Carolina in the last cycle because I thought it could be the determining vote on whether we elected, who we elected to the United States Senate. The Lumbee didn't come out and vote. And my criticism is the candidate that I supported didn't really understand the needs of the Lumbee and what had happened historically to the Lumbee. And so we just absolutely need to understand that those votes matter. And when you determine elections, you gain political power. And that's another important reason to make sure that you exercise that voting franchise. The fourth reason is because things won't change unless you vote. The answer to revolution in this country, armed insurrection in this country, is the ballot box. We saw what happens when people seek power through armed insurrection, and we're seeing what happens right now. And so the availability of access to the franchise, the voting franchise, the exercise of the voting franchise, the determination that happens as a result of those votes will empower people well into the future, will matter to your grandchildren, will matter to your nieces and your nephews and your people. It will matter because if in fact you secure a Senate seat, you will secure the loyalty and the affection and the work to do the work of more people coming to the United States Senate. We used to have a saying, Al Franken and I sat together when I was on the Committee on Indian Affairs. And we used to have a saying, what happened at the Indian Affairs Committee stayed at the Indian Affairs Committee. And it was a horrific feeling that people did not really understand the substandard housing, did not understand that the education attainment and the access to education was not equal, did not understand that as we look at the per pupil or per patient expenditure in Medicare, that Indian Health Services in my state was only paying a third of that cost. People did not understand that outside of the Indian Affairs Committee. The more people we can get to understand these challenges, the more people we can get to understand the historic wrongs that have been done and the notion of sovereignty and treaty rights and jurisdiction, the more people will ask that question at the next Supreme Court nominee. Do you know what has been the historic challenges for tribal courts? Do you know what has been the historic challenges for tribal people? You know, we saw the numbers today or in the last couple of days. The pandemic hit Indian country harder than any other group of people. And think about that. Harder than any other group of people. But yet we have a lack of awareness of these disparities. The Navajo didn't have running water in very many parts of their community. Now that's being addressed by the new infrastructure bill, but that wouldn't have happened without gaining political power. That would not have happened without people standing up and voting their interest and voting for the candidate that's going to most address these challenges. And so never, ever think that it doesn't matter. That vote matters, and it matters because you'll have an opportunity to change the outcome of elections, which will elevate the voices of Indigenous people, not just in the Dakotas, not just in Montana, not just in Hawaii or Alaska, but in Georgia. They will understand that there are people all across our country who have been marginalized, who have rights that have never been honored, have treaty rights. We have obligations that have never been honored in this country. And it is time we step up. We're coming to a holiday. One of the pieces of advice, I got a chance to write a lot of articles for when President Biden was coming into office. And the article that I wrote was really about Indigenous. It was about honoring the treaties. It was about taking that step for full citizenship for Native people, but also understanding they are citizens of their nation and what that means, that dual citizenship that Native people have and the obligations that we have. And I believe that, if I'm Joe Biden tomorrow, I declare Columbus Day gone and basically use that day to honor our Indigenous people and their culture and their contribution to America. My fifth reason for why you should vote and why you need to get that vote out is because Native Americans serve our country at a higher level than any ethnic group in America. Think about that. And I'm proud to say Native women also lead the way. I have been with the Native women veterans groups. I have walked in powwows with our veterans who are young, who are vibrant, who are wanting to still serve, wanting to come home and still serve their communities after their retirement from the military. But think about this. Think about how you can honor that service. No one honors the flag. No one honors military service in any way, shape, or form, and I go to a lot of celebrations, the celebration of patriotism and honoring the flag and honoring our military is unsurpassed in Indian country. And I know that's true in Georgia as well, because your uncles and your aunts and your grandchildren put on that uniform and fight for the franchise. They fight for our way of life. Is it perfect? No. But they know that this is the way towards full citizenship. Voting. And finally, my final reason, 6, you should vote because they don't want you to. Think about that. Why don't they want you to vote? They're afraid that you won't vote the way they want you to vote, and that it will somehow change something. That people who have been marginalized, who haven't had a voice, that they'll actually get a voice. They'll move to the front of the line when the opportunities present themselves. And so what I would say is, you know, I'm a stubborn person, and I always say the surest way to get me to do something is tell me I can't. Tell me that it's not for me. Tell me that I'm not to be that person. And I want to tell you, the promise of this country has not been equally realized. Has not been equally realized. And until it is, we will suffer economically, we will suffer politically, we will suffer socially until we elevate all of our voices in the political arena. And I'm going to close with a story, and I'd be glad to answer any questions, but I want to close with a story about my campaign in 2012. No one thought I'd get elected. I mean, it wasn't even on the radar that I would go to the United States Senate. But one of the motivating reasons for me wanting to go to the Senate was that I had made a promise years ago that I would be a voice for Native people who I spent a lot of time with. I spent a lot of time talking about these issues to the Clinton administration. I spent a lot of time visiting with people about what those challenges were, both as tax commissioner and as attorney general. And I understood the challenge. But when I was elected, I didn't have a lot of time to get ready and to, know, because it was a long shot at best. But I remember the moment where I realized what this country could be. And as you heard in the introduction, I'm a small town girl. I grew up in a community of 90 people. My family was 1/10 the population. I was only when I was born, my mother had 4 children. It might sound familiar to a lot of you. No twins. My brother was only 2 going to be 3, and my sister was 1 going to be 2, and I had a sister who was 1 year old. And my dad was a seasonal construction worker. He drove heavy equipment most of his life, but had to travel for work and had to understand, and got laid off in the fall. And I used to tell people we prayed for a late fall and an early spring because unemployment would only go so long, and he couldn't work those jobs in North Dakota during the winter. And my mom was a school cook and a janitor. We cleaned the school, the little grade school, every night, me and my sisters and my brother. And so I understand the challenges of living on the margins. And so when I'm in the United States Senate, the first time I presided, the formula, the ritual is pretty standard. You gavel in the Senate, and then you say the prayer. Pastor Black comes up and says a prayer to bless the body. And then the person presiding in the Senate leads the Senate in the Pledge of Allegiance. So I turned and addressed the flag and put my hand on my heart. And I could barely get through it because I thought, only in this country can a young, girl from a town of 90 people whose mom was a janitor and a school cook, and his dad was a seasonal construction worker and unemployed a lot of the year, only in this country can this happen. That opportunity needs to be realized for everyone. I have the advantage. my skin color, right? I mean, people don't want to address that privilege, but it makes a difference. It should not make a difference. And I want that next generation of our children who will be for the first time majority minority, to bring their energy, to bring their spirit, to bring their ideas to institutions of power. And until we make that happen, until we actually realize the dream of voting people in like that, we will not realize the full dream of America. And so I can't stress enough the importance of Native vote. I can't stress enough the importance of making sure that regionally we have all Native and Indigenous voices heard, because it will, in fact, expand the reach of Native people and hopefully bring justice to the economic justice and political justice to people who have been disenfranchised and marginalized for far too long.
Good morning, Senator. This is Marion McCormick, Chief of the Lower Muskogee Creek Tribe. It is so good to have you to visit with us virtually this morning. You are an inspiration to all of us, especially we ladies, that we will get out there and we will make sure that our people get out and vote, make their voices heard, because if they do not, then we have no rights to complain. And it's time to bring our people up from where they are now and for us to soar with the eagles.
Thank you so much. I'd be glad to answer questions. I guess I have a question for you. Are you seeing, in North Dakota, in the last election, there was a concerted effort to stop Native people from voting. We had a great group who came in and fought for that Native vote and basically won important cases in our district court, which eventually went to the circuit court and were upheld. Are you seeing that same level of barriers to voting in Georgia?
My tribe is in a rural area, and we do have a lot of barriers to voting, especially the elders not being able to get out. And now we face a little bit more of a barrier with them having to, if they're going to do absentee voting, they have to print everything out, sign it, scan it, and send it back, which most of them have no idea how to do. In North Dakota, I worked very hard on rural postal delivery when I was in the Senate. And so many of our Native people, where if you lived in a rural community that was not Indigenous, you got the mail delivered to your house. But if you lived in Native communities, you got your mail delivered to cluster boxes on the reservation with a P.O. box. And that P.O. box, because the mail, you couldn't demonstrate your street address. And in many reservations, there aren't street addresses. They were trying to stop people from voting. And so the churches and the civil society stepped in and they started doing clever workarounds, and the tribe worked to try and make sure that those votes were counted. Everybody who wanted to vote could vote. And so I hope as tribal leaders, you are doing everything you can to put pressure on this system, but also to make sure that our tribal leaders are, or that all of your people can vote, especially your elders who have sacrificed so much for their tribe and for their community, but also for this country. And so it breaks my heart when I hear that all of this paperwork may limit voting, especially for elderly and for your elders.
Senator Heitkamp, actually 4 directions. Native American Rights Fund, National Congress of American Indians were on the ground in North Dakota when they decided that all of a sudden during a primary everything was okay, and then during the general you needed an ID. I hear in court all the time where parcel. Well, parcel don't count in Indian country because they can change at a drop of a hat. So I do know what you're talking about. I see the same thing happening here in Georgia. Fortunately, we have some real good people that are on the ground that are fighting this. Unfortunately, the law takes a while to go through the court system. The court cases here in Georgia might even go past 2024. I mean, that's how complicated they are. But one of the things that we preach, and we see the other organizations here in Georgia, like Fair Count, Fair Fight. We had a multicultural panel here with different organizations, is that yes, we have the barrier now. Let's find a way to go around them, through them, but get our people to vote. And I really appreciate your words, because we saw the turnout of the Native vote during a special election in January of 2021 here, where the self-identified Native Americans showed up at 71%, the highest percent of any race in Georgia. And so really having you here is just in hearing your voice and going through the same thing that they actually are going through Georgia is heart-lifting, because the fact is you didn't stop, and we're not going to stop. So I really want to thank you. And before I get done there, Erica.
Thank you for your passionate and empathetic words today, Senator Heitkamp. My name is Erica. I'm with Four Directions Native Vote. And your words speak to every generation of Native Americans today. Absolutely inspiring. Thank you for recognizing the historic wrongs that were happening and are still happening today. Thank you for your empathy. Thank you.
Well, I tell the story. I try and tell the story every place. It's not my story to tell, but I've been given an opportunity to stand. And, I used to go every year to the Secretary of Interior when I was Attorney General, State Attorney General. And I always sat at the end so that when we addressed the Secretary of Interior, I would get the last question. And I always asked them what they were going to do for Native children. What was the plan to correct the wrongs and to deal with the trauma and to work collectively in a government-to-government relationship to honor the treaties? And they gave me the same answer every time. And it was like, we share your concern. We share your concern. There's a lot of sharing our concerns, right? But finally, the last time that I visited with them, I looked at the time it was Secretary Babbitt and Solicitor Leshy, and I said, could you just humor me once and say you're going to do something about it? Well, they're not going to do something about it until political power transfers in this country. They're not going to do something about it until Natives vote. And all of the fight delegations that get sent to Washington, D.C., who eloquently describe situations that need to be remedied, all of that doesn't matter nearly as much as exercising that political power. And at the margin, when you look at your numbers, you can determine not only the race in Nevada, in Colorado, and you can determine this race in Georgia. And that's why I was so thrilled to be asked to come and talk to you all, to not speak for you, but to tell you the lessons that I've learned and how important, as somebody who served in the United States Senate, how important it is to exercise that political vote. Because when you do that, you will get the attention not only of the people you elect and help elect, but the attention of the people who ignored your voice up until this point, who now realize that they have to pay attention and they have to change how they're doing business.
Well, Opula, thank you. And, I guess just to go a little bit further on what you said about Interior, we now have historically the first Native American that is the cabinet member in the Department of Interior. And you know, when I see her, I love saying Madam Secretary. I love identifying her as a cabinet member. But when I'm home, we call her Auntie Deb. So when you see her, tell Auntie Deb that Lakota country and Georgia, the tribes in Georgia, Indian country says hi.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's what happens when you change political power. Different people make decisions. Different people get put in a spot where they can make a difference. And so it's proof point number one about the importance of voting.
Just one last thing, Senator. You mentioned a lot of the veterans, you know, especially, you know, you look at the post-traumatic stress, you know, of veterans, and especially our women. My daughter's a, you know, a combat vet, and, you know, captured, destroyed insurgents. And one of the things she said was, there's nothing out there for us women, you know, especially Native women, you know, for any kind of counseling. So, you know, that's, I'm glad you brought up veterans. It's very, you know, good that a lot of us had, you know, suffered the trauma from our fathers, grandfathers, our brothers, sisters, now our own children, you know. So thank you very much. Appreciate you very much.
But yet, you raise your hand, pledge allegiance to this country, and put on the uniform. Put on the uniform. And that's probably the most important reason for Natives to vote, is to honor that service, honor that commitment, and honor the damage that commitment and that service can have. And I will tell you, I've been honored to walk with a group of female veterans. There's some great groups across the country of women warriors, and I hope your daughter reaches out and finds other people who have the same experience, same life experience that she's had with service. And so I thank her for her service, but tell her there are other people who are walking that same path that she can reach out to.
I would like to say, Mado, thank you for your work in the Senate, because I know that you are a strong leader and that you'll continue to work towards helping each and every one of us. Mado, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you so much.
Okay, well, Senator, we really appreciate your time and your very, very strong words. I know that the citizens of Georgia are going to hear this, but I also know that Indian country is going to hear this, in that it is going to make a difference in Nevada. It's going to make a difference in Georgia. It's going to make a difference in Wisconsin. It's a fact that we, as I always say, we are the minority, the minorities, but we're a minority within nations, within a nation. And so that, you know, your words are very strong. They're right on point. And I think that people listening that may not have thought they should participate will do so now. So I really appreciate your words, and thank you for coming today.
Thank you so much for having me. Good luck in the rest of the conference. If there's anything we can do, or I can personally do, or one country can do, let us know. We'd be glad to help in any way we can. This is part of our rural fabric. The work that we do at One Country is to try and get people to understand that one country is not one monoculture. It is a wonderful, diverse place to be, and that certainly our Native brothers and sisters are a huge part of that rural culture. Thank you so much.
One more thing before you go, if you could send us the information where we can put it out there for people to visit One Country, the information, your website and stuff, so that we can put it out there and make sure that people are aware that's there.
Yeah, well, they can just Google One Country Project and find us, but it's onecountryproject.org. And so come and look. We've done a lot of work extending issues and trying to educate on how diverse rural America is, rather than this kind of sense that the national media has that is just one big monolith.
Okay, well, thank you. Wopilan, you have a great day. Thank you.
You too. God bless you all.
God bless you.